Yo, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be pulling the engine and the transmission out of the CJ here. It's going to be a good one, so let's get to it. But I'm kind of going back and forth in my head how I want to do this. If I want to drop the trans first, then pull the engine out, or just pull everything out together. And if I do end up going that route, I could actually pull off the fenders and the grill. It's actually pretty easy to do. One, it'll make it easier to film, and two, if I did leave everything on, these headers would have to come out, and I don't know how well that's gonna go. So I think that is the route I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take off the fenders first and the grill, get the coolant drained out of the radiator, and then we'll go from there. The driver's side fender doesn't have anything attached to it. The only thing on this side is this little solenoid here. And then once that's off, the only thing holding the fenders on, there's supposed to be 4 bolts here, but I only see 2. On the firewall there, and then coming underneath the grill, there's 3 or 4 bolts underneath. Gonna go ahead and spray some cat piss on them bolts, because it's probably been a minute. Hey, this side has 3 out of the 4. That ain't bad. Those bolts did not fight me at all. Check this out. When Dad put it back together all them years ago, he used anti-seize. Good looking out, Daddy. And then here are the 3 bolts on the front that hold the fender to the grill. Forgot there's also going to be this electrical connection for the light, so we'll just unplug the bulb, feed that through. And then there's a brace at the back I forgot to mention, but that's the last thing holding it. That's all there is to it. Same process on the driver's side, so I'm going to do that quick. With that out of the way, we can get the grill. Now, believe it or not, the hardest part about getting the grill off is just getting all the wiring stuff, the wiring harness out of there for the headlights and the turn signals. The radiator, we need to drain the coolant, and then it's just 4 bolts that hold it onto the grill. And then the hoses obviously need to come off. Pull the radiator out, and then there's 1 body mount in the middle, and then these 2 supporting braces, because as you can see, it moves around a good bit. So let's go underneath there and drain the coolant. So if you can see it right underneath the radiator here, there's a little drain. So we'll crack that open. I got a funnel, and I hope all the coolant fits into my primitive bucket here. There it is. A little bit of a mess. I thought the coolant was gonna look a lot worse than that. That actually doesn't look too bad. Still a little bit green. While that continues to trickle out, we'll go ahead and get off some of these radiator hoses. Got the upper hose right here. Go ahead and get that off. Now the only thing holding the rad in is 4 simple bolts. Now just pull it up and out. There it sits. I got the harness all disconnected on the passenger side. It's pretty easy. All you really gotta do is unplug the headlights, unplug the turn signal, and then feed it through. So now all we got are the 2 support props, and then the single body mount right there in the middle. That with anti-seize again. I'm gonna unbolt the props at the back because up here it looks like there's some alignment going on to make sure the hood closes, I guess. And this should pop right off. So now that we got the grill off, we are left with that. Now what we have to do is anything attaching the engine to the firewall, we have to take off. Things like the throttle cable, heater lines, stuff like that. So I'm gonna start knocking those out. Throttle cable's easy enough. First we'll just pop it off. Squeeze the 2 clips together for the bracket. There we go. Next is the fuel line. On the fuel pump down here, we got 2 lines. One goes up to the carb, and then one comes from the tank. So we'll take off the one going to the tank. Just a little hose clamp on there. And that just goes underneath the oil pan and then along the passenger side frame rail. So we can just let that dangle there. That won't be in the way. And then we have the 2 coolant lines going into the firewall. I'm just gonna take them completely off. So I'm gonna mark them real quick. Probably end up cutting that one, just getting a new hose, but we'll stick it out of the way for now. We'll get the solenoid tucked up away on the engine because that's all gonna just be coming with it. And then there's a grounding strap. Actually, no, that won't be a problem. That's just going to the starter. There probably is a grounding strap somewhere though, I'd imagine. We'll find it later. Now the steering shaft here is gonna have to get unbolted at the steering gearbox. That way the headers will clear. So I'm gonna loosen this bolt right here, which is the sleeve that holds the steering shaft onto the gearbox. Well, that's a nut end bolt. Let me turn the steering wheel a little bit. Okay, I got the steering shaft off, but I almost forgot the power steering lines need to come off too. So the high pressure line, I'm gonna take off the steering box, and then the low pressure line, I can actually take that off at the reservoir. So with those final things out of the way, the steering shaft and the power steering lines, that is everything for the engine short of the motor mounts. Now we need to focus on the transmission. We need to undo the clutch linkage and then just take off this top plate for the shifter, and that'll pop off. So let's head underneath there and see what that linkage looks like. So laying on my back here underneath the driver's side, here's the bell housing, oil pan. Oh, and that reminds me, don't let me forget to drain the oil before we yank it. So all we have to do is unbolt the clutch linkage right here, and then take off this bracket with the 2 bolts. Check this out. That boot is barely on there. I feel like that's not in spec, but whatever. And then lastly, the line coming off the output shaft here, that needs to come off. Got everything disconnected underneath the trans. Now we'll come up here and get the shifter plate off. I already loosened all these bolts by hand. That way I can just come in with the gun and zippity zappity. Got all the bolts off, shifter should be free. Now all them gears are exposed, so I'm gonna stick a trash bag in. Good to go. Now we're ready to take off the carburetor and get the engine stand ready to go. Actually, wait, no, I gotta drain the oil. Thanks for reminding me. And the transmission fluid, also the transfer case. All right, the engine oil's about all out. Transfer case is draining right now. Now I know they say make sure you can get off the fill plug before you do the drain plug, but I got work to do. And I don't plan on filling it anytime soon. But it's going. All right, now we should be good. So let's go ahead and get this carburetor popped off. That's just 4 bolts around the outside, and then the fuel line coming in right there. Take care of that fuel line first. Now with our carburetor off, we can go ahead and get our hoisting plate fitted on there. Got the plate secured on there. Let's go ahead and roll the engine hoist into position. Well, we're hitting the bumper right here, so I'm gonna have to boom that out a little bit. I had to boom it all the way out, 1/2 ton, and I was reading the plate here, max load 1,000 pounds, that's 1,000 pounds, and I feel like we're pretty close with the engine and the transmission. So considering how close it is, the right thing to do would probably be drop the transmission, then pull the engine, but I'm not gonna do that. So let's see what happens. We'll go ahead and hook this up to the last hole, just to try and evenly distribute the weight as best we can. Now we'll, I'm not gonna put any tension on it yet. I'm gonna try and figure out how these motor mounts are mounted, and then unbolt them, try and get the engine out. So I'm thinking it's just those 2 nuts down there that need to come off in order for the motor mount to be free from the frame. I already did the other side, it was a little bit harder to get to, but I'm gonna take these off and see if that's not it. I think that was definitely it, because this grounding strap was on one of the studs there. I'm gonna put some tension on the lift here and pull the engine up a little bit and see if it comes up off the mounts. I was actually able to separate the motor mount here, coming under here with the pry bar. We'll just slowly jack it up and see what we can do here. That was a good sign, I think. All right, let's see what we forgot to unplug. It actually looks good. I think we'll be all right. Oh yeah. Something is catching. I think it's the starter over here catching. Yeah, that's definitely what's happening. See if I can persuade it with the pry bar. There we go. Keep coming. On today's episode of Why I'm an Idiot, I don't know why I thought all this wiring could just stay on the engine. Obviously, it's loomed to the Jeep going to the firewall. Just a local idiot. But I got it all disconnected now. I just got to feed it out, and then we can continue pulling out the engine. That is looking pretty good, guys. We got the engine out of there. It actually went really well getting it out. Looks like I laid the transfer case lever flat. That's all right. That linkage has so much play in it. It actually helped me out. But we're not done yet. We obviously have to separate the engine and the transmission. So what I'm gonna do is I got the transmission jack set up right there. I'm gonna lower it down so everything's level, get the transmission strapped in, and then we'll take off the bell housing bolts. That's a little off. There we go. Buckle up. So we'll pop off the starter here. I already got the bolt on the bottom, just this top bolt. Starter coming out. All right, so let's go ahead and do all the bell housing bolts. All right, that should do it. I'm gonna go ahead and lower the engine a little bit. That doesn't help. Ah, more coolant. Whatever. More coolant. More coolant. What a mess. As soon as I turn off the camera, it's gonna work. Well, that took about 25 minutes to wrestle those apart, and I was right. As soon as I turned off the camera, it came apart. and I made an absolute mess out of the shop in the process, but they're apart. So next I need to get the pressure plate off and the clutch, take off the flywheel. Pressure plate looks like it's 6 bolts. And the clutch just fell out. But that's all right, because we're getting new clutch and pressure plate. Probably end up getting a new flywheel too, unless this one can be resurfaced, who knows. Let's get those flywheel bolts off. 3/4? Oh yeah. Get off of there. Cool. I got the engine stand set up here. I actually had to run out to the store real quick to get longer bolts. Here's the bell housing bolts that came out of it. They are just barely too short. So I had to get a little bit longer bolts, but now we can set this thing up and get it mounted. All right, I got the engine up on the stand behind me here. The bolts I got were actually a little bit too long, but nothing a couple washers couldn't fix. So the engine's on the stand, and then I spent the last like hour cleaning the shop. I don't know why, but as I was going, I was just throwing all the hardware onto the table here, but luckily I was able to remember it, so I labeled everything, got it in bags. I labeled all the wires and lines and everything, so everything is labeled. I started making this list of stuff I realized we're gonna need as we go. But that is all I have for you guys in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you stay tuned. Next time we're gonna start tearing down this engine. That's gonna be the next video in the CJ-7 series. So if you like the video, consider subscribing. Take it easy. See you guys in the next one.